Welcome back, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there during the quick delay. I want to thank Nick Heeman, Chairman of the Providence School Committee, for joining us. Now it is big time. It's the money man, Gary Sasse. Cha-ching. How's the market doing today, Mr. Sasse?
About even.
Just up, 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 and right. Big mergers? Any big mergers in the money world today?
Not that I've heard. I've been at Bryant.
The past couple of weeks has been a lot of focus in Providence, statewide, and even nationally, discussing the state of the Providence school system. Nick Heeman was on just now. He's been chairman of the school committee for 3-4 years. Obviously, the Hopkins report painted about as dire condition of a school system as there is in the United States. The Wall Street Journal called it, a hall of horrors. Education horror show. Tomorrow, the Board of Education at the statewide level is supposed to take action and outline a new initiative for the future of Rhode Island. What's your thoughts on all of this?
Well, I've publicly stated a position that I felt it was time for the state to take over, that unfortunately the Providence school system the last several years has been dysfunctional.
Several decades?
Well,
yeah, I'd go decades.
It's been dysfunctional. They have not maintained their facilities. They can't keep a superintendent. I go back to Jerry Jones when he was superintendent in 1980, and this has been going on ever since. There's interference in City Hall with the way the superintendent does their job. There's an ordinance requirement that the school can't purchase anything that's over $5,000. And so it functionally was problematic. We know what the test scores were. Symbolically, it's the school system in the capital city. It's the largest school system, 24,000 kids, I think, attend Providence schools. So something new needed to happen, and I think a takeover was the only thing. I don't think Providence was in a position politically and administratively to fix the problem by themselves.
So let's talk about this for a second. If a normal public school system is here, Providence schools are here, but below Providence school system is Central Falls school system, which the state took over 25 years ago and has test scores 40% lower than Providence.
Right, and let's talk about that, because let me give you a history lesson, because I actually was one of the people that negotiated with Central Falls during the Sumlin administration.
Sure.
I was Sumlin's fiscal advisor for those first several months. Central Falls came in, Mayor Lazar came in, said he couldn't raise the cash, couldn't increase the taxes to support the schools. People forget at that time we had a school aid formula. So the state was paying, I forgot it was 80.
He said 91% at that time.
Okay, 90. The number that stuck in my, I don't disagree with that. The number that stuck in my memory was 90%. And so he was asking us to pick up 10%. Capital was still going to be the responsibility of the city. So the theory we had, was okay, for 10%, let's take it over, but let's get something for the 10%. And at that time, I think there was one elementary school, one middle school, one high school in Central Falls, and we saw this as a great opportunity to make it a demonstration district to see what could be done to fix up urban education in Rhode Island, not just in Central Falls. And then the ball was handed off to RIDE, and they didn't even get to the line of scrimmage. They fumbled the ball on the snap. It was pathetic. They used the same bureaucratic techniques. They put in place a board of trustees, but RIDE was calling the shots. All the usual suspects were running the system, and so that did not work. And I think that was really unfortunate, because I think our idea was good. I think the additional state amount of money, putting in, increasing state support for Central Falls by 10%, which is not a very big city, it wasn't a very big amount of money, could have paid back tremendous dividends, and the state dropped the ball. So when the state comes in and takes over a system, people have a right to be skeptical.
And don't the parents in Central Falls have a right to say, what about us? What about our children? You failed, you continue to fail. Now you've named the last 2 superintendents, one to be a special something to the commissioner, and that's the most recent superintendent. His predecessor, Hannah Gallo, just got named interim superintendent in Providence. This is not track records. I mean, it's somewhat bizarre. Usually you achieve more, you build your record, and then you get hired by the next highest team in the superstructure.
Fran Gallo came in with piss and vinegar.
Yep.
And unfortunately, she was not backed up by the powers that be, so I would hardly fault her. The person that was the superintendent that's now working for the department, I know the person. He's a good professional. He understands urban education. So the problem is more deeper than just the superintendent. I don't want to give you a story of woe and what the demographics are and the disadvantaged kids, but it ties back to the way we fund schools. It ties back to having low expectations and not holding people accountable. And so the critical point here...
And I don't mean to put you on the spot. You're not responsible for managing these things. But we now have, we're going to have, in the course of a few hours, 48, 72 hours, 2 school systems under the control of the Rhode Island Department of Education. One's been there for 25 years. It's been an abysmal failure at every level. And the second one is about to go under their control. What can be our expectation?
I think there are a couple of things that you can look at when you talk about takeovers, and I'm very anxious tomorrow to see if these things are done, because I think they're best practices. There's no guarantee a takeover is going to result in success, but there are ways to do it that you have some hope that you will.
What should parents look for? What should people in the community look for?
There's several things on takeover. The first thing is community involvement. To think that Moses could come down from the mountain and fix the schools is naive. So if I was a parent, I would look at how is the community going to be involved? How are parents going to be involved? What is going to be done to develop site-based school systems, where there's local input. And so if there's not a strong component of, community involvement in the takeover, then it's bound to fail because there's not buy-in and there's not a shared partnership. The second thing that has to happen, and we always make excuses, we don't do this, but this is an opportunity. This commissioner has to come out of the gate, with very high, I use very, not just high, with very high expectations that all kids can learn, that all kids can be successful. If we just use mealy-mouthed stuff, we're taking it over, we're going to make it better, and you don't have a passion that you're taking it over because there's nothing wrong with these kids. There's something wrong with the system they put in. There may be something wrong in the...
And should that be numerical? Right now,
Yes.
I think at many of the middle schools, less than 10%, 15% are meeting standards, right? Or meeting expectations.
Oh,
Should she say in 3 years we're going to double those numbers?
Yeah, and that's the other third point I was going to lead to how you judge a successful takeover. It's having a strategic plan, but having measurable and quantifiable targets in that strategic plan. So there's a lot of different quantifiable targets you can have. You could have one on facilities. That facility is going to reach a certain standard in the next couple of years. You could have one on site-based management, that principals, we're going to change the system where principals have control. If the principals want it, don't throw it back in their face. But we're going to change control. And then on test scores, we're going to make 20% improvement or 5% improvement. It needs to be some rational number that's researched and studied. And then every year, or every 6 months, I wouldn't even wait a year, you come back and there's a public accounting and a public reporting, primarily to the parents, primarily to the community where these schools are located. Yeah, we've met our goal. No, we haven't met our goal. This is what we're going to do to change to meet the goal. There's no shame or no embarrassment in not meeting a goal. It's a goal. But there is really a shame or malpractice in not having a goal. And the goal has to be quantitative. It can't be some wishy things that all kids are going to love each other and we'll have diversity. It's going to be a nice place to go to school and the football team's going to win some games. It has to be much more than that. It has to be targeted. There are probably 3 or 4 targets that can be used. I mentioned some a minute ago. So if you come in with an intervention that involves the community, involves building strength at the local level, has high expectations, and has quantitative measurable goals that you report back and held accountable, then you have a system in place. The fourth thing, which I hadn't thought about till now, because I was on a row with the first three, is I am going to be very interested to see what the organizational structure is and who is put in place to be the de facto master, the de facto superintendent. They can call this person anything they want, but who is going to be in charge, what authority that person has, what support that person has, how are we going to support, and this doesn't work unless there's buy-in from people in the building. How is that person going to be able to work, with the teachers and with the administrators? Are they going to go to places like Harvard and have instead of a collective bargaining agreement that's adversarial, have a facilitated win-win situation where you sit down and say, no, we've got to make this contract better in terms of work rules and standards. I'm not talking about compensation and benefits. We got to make this contract better because obviously our kids aren't doing very well. So what, as you as a professional educator, what would you do on work rules to make this a more kid-friendly contract? And what should we do as management so we can afford this kid-friendly contract?
800-pound gorilla in the corner is a real reality. That reality is, since let's just start at 1990, there's been one extremely consistent element to the Providence School Department, very little turnover, great progression, is that the Providence Teachers Union have had, I think, only 4 heads: Marcia Reback, Phyllis Tenian, Steve Smith, and now Mrs. Calabro.
And Steve Smith really tried to work on collaborative ventures.
Absolutely, until the mayor fired all the teachers.
Right,
and during that period, we've had, I couldn't even name them all, between acting and full-time, 15 different superintendents. How does anyone make a progression in improving the Providence school system without a real buy-in and collaboration with the Providence teachers?
Well, I just told you one way to do it. One thing you have to do, we know it is too early for the postmortem. We can spend the next 60 minutes talking about it. You're to blame, she's to blame, he's to blame. Don't even talk about that. And go in there with an attitude that the teachers are there. We're not going to replace all these teachers, and so we have to do something different. And what I just described to you is a way to do it. You go up to Harvard, or there are other universities that can do this, and you ask for a facilitated negotiation, not a mediation, not an arbitration, and you define carefully that we're going to have to build a win-win contract. We're going to facilitate a discussion that deals with one thing, and one thing only: how do we change the work rules? How do we get a modern contract that changes the work rules, where the teachers are going to have to give, but you're also going to have to recognize that you're going to have to invest a lot more in teacher development, in professional development. It's that kind of process.
So let me push back on a couple of points you make. Number one is, nobody wants to go back and look at history, except for history might help in this situation. Maybe invading Afghanistan isn't a good idea. English didn't seem to do too well. Russians didn't seem to do too well. Maybe it's not the brightest idea to go and invade Afghanistan, because they're a pretty feisty bunch over there and seem to be able to repel invaders. What do? We ignore the failure previously, and we go and have the same failure. Almost identical. Tens of thousands lost, billions spent, etc. Well, let me take the second part. The second part is that the teachers will say, yeah, we'll work more hours, we'll do more training, we'll work extra days. Where's the money? We want to be paid more. Where's the money? And at some point, this may not be about well-intention, may not be about organization, it may not be about leadership. It just may be simply about dollars and cents.
Right, and dollars and cents are a problem because we already spend $18,000 per pupil in Providence. It's high, and it's much higher than other urban districts.
Absolutely.
And so part of the answer that I'm going to jump around a little bit on here is if the intervention is as good as they say it is, then part of the thing is to identify efficiencies, not to save money and cut taxes, but to reinvest the money. But if the teachers have an attitude that it's traditional collective bargaining, it's business as usual, this is going to be very difficult.
But why shouldn't they?
Why shouldn't they?
Why shouldn't they? They've been very successful at it. They never lose the game. People come and go. Mayors leave. Governors go off.
Well-
And they've never seen any bite back. They've never seen any mayor or city council be willing to actually take them on consistently. Angel Tavares fired all the teachers. Guess what he did 2 days later? Brought back all the teachers.
And the question is, if you fire all the teachers, you don't want your plan B. If you don't have a plan B, you got a
That's
problem.
right.
No, there's no silver bullet. It involves, leadership. It involves setting up, a structure where leaders can work. I've just described to you twice, how you do this facilitated discussion. Now, if the teachers come to the table, they won't participate in this facilitated discussion, then you have to go to Plan B, and Plan B is involving the legislation, doing things different. Plan B involves choice. So, there are a lot of ways you can educate kids. The best way is to fix up the school system, and you can't fix up the school system unless you have a collective bargaining agreement that's user-friendly. And it's to the teachers. I think teachers are professional. I think there are a lot of good teachers in the Providence system. There are also probably a lot of teachers that don't show up on Friday in the system as well. But I think you start out on a positive note that we're dealing with professional people. The system hasn't worked. Our kids are getting screwed. There's been ineffective teaching. There's been a situation where the kids don't have the academic materials they need, and they are in facilities that are not environmentally clean and safe. That's the situation. Now, do you want to be part
So let me argue the teacher's position. You don't keep us safe. You don't put us in good buildings. You don't support us.
I remember those conversations going back, decades when Marcia Reback was president of the Providence AFT. She would talk all the time about not having a decent facilities from which to work from. That's part of the solution. When you talk about a win-win situation, the teachers have a legitimate gripe. They work, but that's...
So let's just talk about facilities, equipment, supplies, just the basics. Just showing up for work and having a desk and a computer for most people. The city of Providence is functionally, economically in distress. State of Rhode Island has an ongoing imbalance that's now become the norm rather than. And if the commissioner says, I need another $50 million in the next 6 months to make this reality happen, that's a real number. That's 15% increase in.
You have to live within your resources. Yeah, you give me $1 million and I'll make the street cleaner here. But there are a couple of things that can be done, and this is where we're going to find out if the people in state level who have talked about the need to take over will put their money where their mouth is. We have a school aid formula that underfunds urban districts because it costs more to educate an urban kid that's disadvantaged bilingual issues, et cetera. Now, it's true that 65% of the Providence budget comes from the state, but that needs to be looked at. It's legendary how poorly we've funded our ELL programs, our language programs. So yes, if you're going to fix up the resources, it's not just throwing dollars at the problem, it's throwing dollars at the problem in a way that's intended to address something. But there's a quid pro quo. You have to go in there, and the $18,000 that we're spending, we've got to look at ways to tighten that up. But at the end of the day, I would see it being very difficult to think you could fix this. I agree with you, without additional resources. And I think those resources have to come from rethinking how the state deals with education. I've been a strong proponent for a long time about a constitutional amendment, making education an enforceable right. The school aid formula is coming up for review next year.
But if I'm a state rep or state senator outside of Providence, I say, are you kidding me? Why would we give Providence any more money? They've been inept at spending money. There's no financial controls. Their per pupil spending is off the charts. And there's no track record, regardless of how much money they get, of any reform success on any issue ever.
Well, there have to be strings to the money, obviously. So it's not just a question of opening up the bank and handing out dollars, but it's part of...
That seems like a job for the money man.
Well,
I think that's a job for the
no,
money
but,
man.
but I think the important.
Let the commissioner run the education reform, put the money man
just-
in charge of the strings.
the money-
Yes.
No,
Get you one of those green,
No.
yep, and
No.
everyone has to come in and say, please, may I have some more money for my classroom?
Yeah, well, I talked about setting measurable goals and targets, economic goals and targets as well. Yeah, the business community needs to do more. Business community, talks a big game about putting up money.
You know what? I'm going to disagree with you. There's one group of CEOs that has put in $75,000. Hold on. Not one word on the record from one of those CEOs, Providence Chamber of Commerce, not one word, one CEO, not one CEO in this community other than the former mayor writing with you. We've already banned him from talking in the future because the schools went down the crapper with him.
No, he was. I could tell you a good story he did, but
And I already sent him a note on that.
no, but
Joe Bailino is banned. Angel Tavares banned. David Cicilline banned.
Oh, yeah, that's what I.
You did Cicilline this weekend on Twitter.
That's well.
But where is the outrage of
No,
CEOs?
it's more than that. It's more than just the outrage, and this is an important lesson. It's getting involved. It's not just it's expressing outrage. It's supporting people that want to fix up the system. But it's more basic than that. I heard you ask Nick a question earlier. Have you ever seen the chairman of the State Board of Education?
Never.
Well, this chairman, and this is not a criticism of the existing chairman, but I go back far enough.
Why wouldn't it be an
Well, I go back
criticism of the
because I go
existing
back
chairwoman?
Because I'm diplomatic. But because I go back far enough, when you looked at the chairs of the Board of Regents or the Board of Education, they were people in their own right who had clout. Remember Carlotti, Flanders, Lippert. I can go, list the names of people. And so all these business guys, it's really easy to give it the office or give it home. And so they put up $75,000 for this study. No, they need to put up their time. Governor Raimondo needs to pick out whoever she wants. It doesn't much matter. Pick out one of those business leaders and say, no, I don't want your $75,000. I want your leadership and I want your time. And you are now chairman of the State Board of Education. And I expect you to be an advocate and ride herd and keep me informed and keep the public informed. That's what business leadership's about. It's not issuing statements or.
Well, I got to tell you, if I were a parent of a student in Providence and I saw that the chairman of the board of Hasbro Corporation had taken on the job as being chair of the Board of Education for the state of Rhode Island in that role, I'd feel much better that things were going to get better.
You just hit amen. That's exactly right. That's what community involvement is about. And I think now is the time. Winston Churchill said. I think he was the first to say it. Others have said it since. Don't waste
a good crisis.
Yeah. Well, we have a new commissioner. She's been in the state a few months now. The initial reports that she's active and involved, and they're good. The governor seems now have to recognize the problem. It took her 5 years, going through promises and this program and that program. But now we're getting down to where the rubber hits the road. Now and these people are well connected, and now it's time for them to get involved and to build up confidence. You're right. If the president of MECA or the president of Hasbro, the president of any one of the FM Global or any one of the major companies in the state, said, I will, at the governor's request, get personally involved and exert leadership, that you would be surprised. No, you wouldn't be surprised. You just said it. But people would be surprised how you begin to change the culture. See, we haven't everything we've spoken about today. We hadn't used the word culture, but there's a cultural change, and the cultural change won't come from inside City Hall. Won't come from inside the school department. It has to come from the community. And that's why community involvement is so important.
Listen, we're coming up on the NFL preseason. Every single team in the NFL thinks it's going to the Super Bowl at the beginning of the year.
It's the Cleveland Browns this year.
It's the Cleveland Browns who are going to go. And the reality is only the New England Patriots go.
Yeah.
You've got to change the culture of losing, and you've got to create some confidence that it can be turned around.
And let me give you one analogy, because the confidence is important. What does it take to turn around an NFL franchise? A quarterback.
Right.
You can't win without a quarterback. And so we've gotten some linemen now. We've got some good running backs, I hope, at Ride and, in the political establishment. But the community leadership, the business leadership is needed to quarterback this effort. I'm still waiting.
So let's say the commissioner is the quarterback, right? High draft pick. We've attracted her from New York. She was up for the commissioner's job. She was the runner-up in Massachusetts. The head coach also plays a role. Governor Raimondo needs to be perceived, as well as in reality, to be engaged in this. And is there the worry that she's going to be at this conference and at that fundraiser and down in Washington spending more time with the DGA than she is otherwise? What we saw this past year on the budget was she advocated for some things. Maybe she made some noise in private meetings with the Speaker and the Senate Majority Leader. But at the end of the day, her agenda, what she thought was best for Rhode Island, did not get included in the state budget.
Because her agenda, well-meaning as it was, were specific, projects, and no one was connecting the dots. So yeah, who can argue against universal pre-K? Who could argue against computers in the school? But how did that relate to solving the problem of urban education?
Right.
It didn't. It was helpful, but it was stuff. It was some tools. And now I think she did play a role in getting to this point. I think there was a lot of things done, behind the scenes that resulted in the situation reaching the point.
Is this her big? Is this really how she's going to be judged? I think in the long term, if she fails on this, it's failed leadership. If she wins this, she might arguably, and I mean win, where you see material improvement in the quality of Providence schools that is transferable over the long term. Does that then jettison her to being maybe one of the best governors we've ever had if she can pull this turnaround?
I think if she can show the leadership to make permanent, real reform in Providence schools and then takes it and carries it beyond there, that's a very important part of a legacy. She'll have two things in a legacy: pension reform and school reform, and that's very powerful. If it doesn't happen, even if she gets involved, then she'll be part of the blame for this.
With that, the money man, Gary Sasse, all the way up. Did you helicopter up from East Greenwich?
No, I hitchhiked.
Yeah. What is it, just Rolls Royces rolling out of East Greenwich coming up here?
I don't know, this guy had a Pinto that picked me up.
Don't you helicopter? We need a helipad out here for GoLocal. I'm going to talk to the mayor. I'm sure he'll be very responsive to our requests.
Well, I hope so.
Aloha. With that, thank you very much.
pleasure.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning in tomorrow. I believe Kate Nagel's got the preeminent political scientist from the University of Virginia, Jennifer Lawless, and I also believe Dan McKee is in the House. Wednesday, I know Speaker of the House, Nick Mattiello, is here, and we'll have some other surprises. Of course, check into the interesting coverage that's been flowing all weekend on the private exclusive club Bailey's Beach down in Newport, trying to have removed off a city sidewalk a hot dog vendor. 3 young Rogers High School students who, as their second job, had created a business. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you back tomorrow.